Hi folks, you're with Tassus today. Tassus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of big city elites, the people who were told they've got degrees, they've got, they come from somewhat well-to-do families, and they live in the big city tree-lined streets in the West, and they're the big supporters of globalization, the mass immigration and gay lesbian issues and removal of all forms of merit and this sort of thing. Now, whether they're just voicing opinions that give them, as they would see it, a sense of sort of moral superiority come cachet, then, or do they really believe it? Are they simply accidental beneficiaries of the shifts and the moves in world wealth and so on? Let's just have a little look at that. What makes up these elites, and how numerous are they really? Who are the actual opinion shapers and who are just the followers? If you look, for example, a lot of the college kids, and particularly the minority group college kids, they're all for the wider globalization agenda, mass migration, and without realizing or without caring, even if they do realize that the standard of living, the purchasing power of the paycheck in the Western world over the last 50 years has fallen by close to 2/3. So the chances of, in an ordinary job, or even a job that pays, double the average wage, and the chances of them ever owning a house or being able to afford to get married and have a family, the ability even to pay off their student debts is in bad shape. So that they've got no future now. Whereas the future 50 years ago would have been, would have had its problems and its shortcomings. Their future now is so grim that they can forget about anything other than really just existing day to day, and that will be their lot in life now, to merely exist day to day, almost as a subsistence existence until the day they sort of fall over from old age or disease or whatever the case may be. But that's the future they have. So how has globalization improved their life? Well, it hasn't. It's made it manifestly worse. Yet they still vigorously support globalization on the basis that there's some revolution that's just around the corner that's going to provide absolute equality of outcome for everybody. Now, the era of the universal basic income and just a few monopolies controlling the delivery of all goods and services in the world, this sort of thing, and people living in little shoeboxes, that is probably the future, and that will be the future of any equality that may exist. So maybe that's the nirvana that they're thinking of. Are they even thinking that far ahead? Are they focusing on particularly the college kids? If we remove the inequalities, then nirvana and a paradise, a Marxist paradise, will automatically follow if we remove the inequalities. That's sort of the classic, punk ass kid sort of view of socialism that is widespread, certainly on the college campuses, senior high school, that sort of thing. It's a bit of a siren song. I remember, say senior high school, I was probably out of it by the time college came, but this idea of, stick it up the rich or something, that's something that appears to have appeal to people of a certain age or a certain, lack of mental ability, perhaps. But coming back to this idea of who are the elites. Now, I was just listening to a few minutes of a speech in the online, and the commentator, and a lot of what he said I agree with, by the way. He just came out and said, well, the inner city elites, and they live in the tree-lined streets, they've got degrees, and that seems to make you a member of the elite. And I don't know, given the amount of college kids that are out there. Just to give you an idea, in a lot of Western countries, the amount of people that went to proper university rather than say a technical college type college, but proper universities like 2 or 3%. The ones who finished was 2%. And if you're looking at the people doing sort of the hard sciences, engineering and so on, then it was minuscule. So that's sort of all changed. In a lot of countries now, the government budgets for how many kids they want to go into university. So they say out of the kids who start high school at age 11, we want 60% of those kids to actually go to university. It doesn't matter what they study; they can study lesbian dance theory. It doesn't matter, but that they go to university is the material point. Whether they study something worthwhile, who cares? But they budget numbers now, and they just lower and lower the university entrance requirement until this is achieved, till the numbers are achieved. So this idea that if you just have a degree, then you're good to go, that's of course not right. Now, talking to people who, we really need the people who are pro-globalist are the ones who have benefited from globalization. Outside of that, you get the followers of it. For example, there are some people sort of, not far from where we live, and the lives of their children who are just sort of entering college now, the lives of their children are going very bleak and very grim, and if not hopeless. And yet they're studying bullshit courses at university and at college, and they'll leave with substantial debts and so on. But the future of their kids is so grim compared to what they're like, what the parents love, but they don't see it that way. For some reason, talking to particularly the wife, and I don't know, mass immigration's fine. Oh no, that's okay. Why shouldn't people be allowed to come here if they want to? And well, it doesn't matter. And oh well, that's okay. And that's all right. I mean, I think it's just and equitable that people, and that's the attitude. And yet the evidence that it's been a stunning and a towering exercise in destruction of the Western standard of living, either it just escapes her. Even if you mention things, to her, like, well, look at the increase in the price of real estate. Oh well, yeah, okay, well, and it's almost like she has no idea. Now she's not an IQ of -5 million, but it seems that her children have been condemned to a life of subsistence that's been caused by the very globalization she speaks so glowingly of, and that sort of, I just struggle to get my head around that. Why would you applaud and support something that's been so injurious, not necessarily to her existence, well, to some extent it has been, but where her children and the grandchildren, their lives are over effectively as active agents and active units of the economy. They're just not there, even though they'll be among, if you like, the better educated ones. And will have in life more benefits than many others might. They're still going to live a life of subsistence existence. So who are the people that have benefited from? This is a very small elite. This would be, there are two classes. If anyone who owns substantial or even 2 or 3 properties of real estate would have done rather well out of globalization, or certainly in terms of real estate appreciation. A property that was sold for $400,000 in the year 2000, which is just as the mass migration thing was starting to kick off. $400,000. This is for a suburban, residential property. That property today is pushing 2.5 million. So we're looking at 5 to 6 times appreciation in less than 25 years. So around 25 years. So if you own three just average priced properties in, say, Sydney, for example, over the last 25 years, without lifting a finger or doing anything, you would have made, let's say you own 3 properties, you would have made between $4 and $5 million capital appreciation. You made between $4 and $5 million by doing nothing, not a thing. So that's where the wealth has come in for property. People who had more than one property. So the other thing was people that had bought in areas that were, like 25 years ago. There's an area not that far from where we live where you could buy a property for $100,000. This is in sort of semi-rural parts of Australia. $100,000, and today those properties are between 1.5 and $2 million, even more. So again, massive appreciation. That just one property wouldn't be enough to, I think, make a huge difference. But if you look at the amount of jobs that pay enough money to even live independently, let alone get ahead, or let alone buy property, or let alone do that, the amount of jobs that pay, then you're already looking at around only 5% or so of jobs allow you enough money to live independently and possibly get ahead. Now that's down from 75%. Again, a massive shift. So the wealth has concentrated on people who have those well-paid jobs. Now the well-paid jobs you can get ahead in, you can go places in a significantly less than 1% of jobs. So we're looking at a tiny elite who are really benefiting in terms of their jobs. And the money that the jobs pay, and then the things they can do with that money, and buying real estate and so on, or maybe putting their kids through elite colleges and so on. But again, we're looking at a tiny proportion of the population. So say in terms of the Australian workforce, we're looking at maybe 25,000 jobs in the whole country that are paying that sort of money. I mean, it's if you want to be generous, say 30,000. Now at the bottom end of that, you're looking at people who have enough money to, assuming they keep that income for a while, and a lot of it's tied up with sort of the socialite class, so that they're immune from performance requirements. So they're part of that rich elite socialites tied in with the banking industry and all that sort of stuff. So they're immune from really being held to account for performance. And if they do make some diabolical fuck up, they just shelve them for a couple of years, give them some quiet, well-paid consultancy gigs, and then move them back into the front line again. So they've got all the prestige and so on. But again, a very small number of people. So if you add, say, the shaker movers in the political class, the banking class, the business class, the people on that sort of money, you'd be looking at, say, in the whole of Australia, you'd be looking at, and this is being generous, 35,000 people, and again being generous. That's the amount of people who can live a life of have the income and access to the prestigious jobs. So it's a very small elite class. Now they're the primary beneficiaries. A lot of the benefit they derive is actually outside of the, if you like, the controlled system. They're being given options to buy property at knockdown prices, and to be able to sell that property at absolutely prices that are many times the market price of the property. And they're being introduced by dark money banking and finance context. They're being introduced to cashed up Chinese buyers, or offshore buyers that want to launder their money, that sort of thing. You've got a vast number of offshore buyers that are buying up swathes of real estate, whether it be from China or India or elsewhere. You're looking at offshore money coming and buying up chains of takeout food stores, then being given special insider trading, if you like, to bring out illiterate peasants as virtual slaves from the third world and work in those places for slave labor type money. So that you're looking at quite a small elite, whether they be international, local, or a mixture of both. You're looking at a very small elite that are actually benefiting from globalization in that sense. And just looking at, just looking at sort of the people who who I know who are particularly strong supporters of globalization. They talk about well, mass migration brings out lots of cheap labour for people to mow my lawns and clean out my swimming pool and that sort of stuff. But these same people who live in these tree-lined streets, who are being gifted well-paid, prestigious jobs without having to go through a rigorous competitive interview process, and when they get golden handshake severance pay, it's to the tune of millions of dollars and this sort of thing. And these are people who couldn't run a fucking bath in the real world. They're just gifted these jobs as part of this socialite elite and so on. And they're quite adamant. I want mass migration, but I don't want those peasants living anywhere near me. Now, given they live in the $5 million, $10 million, plus type expensive houses, they're relatively immune from many of the effects of globalization, but they're still sitting on the ticking time bomb. Their children and grandchildren won't have those same social connections. The wealth will be quickly dissipated through just cost of living and so on. And so it's going to not get at them, but it's going to get at their offspring, and their descendants will ultimately pay the price for the globalization thing. But they're just not now. And I think they quite naively see it as some sort of benefit, because it shifts wealth away from the local citizens, the Western white citizens, that shifts wealth away from them and into the pockets of a tiny elite. Now, if you look at it in terms of the population, it's 0.1% of the population of Australia is directly and decisively benefiting from globalisation. That's 1 in every 1,000 people is really, really creaming it, really doing well out of it. Then in workforce terms, you're looking at 1 in every 500 people. Now, you can say that there's people who are doing all right out of globalisation, but the benefit is temporary. They're only holding these well-paid jobs, for example, for 5 years, then they drop out of that elite level of pay into something more ordinary, and suddenly they're having to face realities that they didn't have to. And this is really the issue, the facing of realities. If all the people who benefit from globalization actually had to make real estate investment decisions without the artificial arrangements to buy incredibly cheap and sell for incredibly high prices through various backroom machinations, they actually had to rely on their own real estate investment savviness to invest. If they had to actually get jobs through a competitive hiring process, they had to prove that they were the best or the most qualified or the most experienced. If they had to face those realities that other people have to face, then they wouldn't be anywhere near as wealthy, and they'd be much more sensitive to globalization. It's only because this elite class has been immunized from all the effects of negative effects of globalization. That's the only reason they're there, and they're part of it. Now, you could say it's spread across for example, the commentariat, journalists and news readers and various talking heads that support globalization and condemn anyone that disagrees with it as being a Nazi, that sort of stuff. Those people, the elites of the educational institutions, professors with an IQ of 90 that are given lifetime tenure and all this sort of stuff, diversity, equity, inclusion directors. The list goes on of people who are pushing the globalization project, if you will, but there's not many of them, and they're just the useful fools. Once their usefulness has gone, they'll be discarded as quickly as a rotting piece of fruit. They're not going to stay there for the long haul. I'll also mention a couple of other things, the shifts in wealth. And I've mentioned this a number of times. The difference in 1970, the difference between the shop floor guy and the CEO in terms of pay was maybe 5 or 6 times. It wasn't really that much. Now, sure, the CEO would get other sort of sundry benefits, such as they may get a nice company car provided. They would get a nice vacation home on the beach in a nice beachside suburb, so they could, they would get those sort of benefits. They'd get a very well attended executive lunchroom, and they'd have the French chef to cook the various sort of meals and so on. So they get those benefits, but the difference was still 5 or 6 times between the shop floor and the CEO. Now today that difference is 130, 150, 200, 250 times difference between the shop floor and the amount of competitiveness that's required to land those executive jobs has actually declined. There's hardly any competition now for those top jobs. It's a small bunch of socialites controlled usually by the big finance, the BlackRocks and that sort of thing. There's a small group of socialites that are just simply appointed and gifted these jobs and are just given a script to read and just do what the fuck you're told, and you can have this nice prestigious job on vast sums of money. So you're getting ridiculous money paid to people who've never had to achieve anything in their lives, who've never had to go through a competitive interview and selection process, and instead they're just appointed. So you get those people who are the beneficiaries, and they obviously have a huge investment, and it suits their purpose to uphold globalization, because the globalization thing is part of what delivered that huge shift in wealth away from the working and middle class white people into the pockets of this very small elite. Which, I mean, if you're looking, say in the United States as an example, how many people are really, the real beneficiaries of this globalization or globalist elite, and if you do the same sort of numbers, you'd be looking at not even a million people would be the real beneficiaries. And, again, you get the camp follower flunkies, the useful fools, but the real beneficiaries, the ones who've got very rich, would be less than a million people, and the whole United States who've really creamed it in as a result of this. So we really need to understand that this globalist elite, that just because you got a degree in sociology and you live in a tree-lined street makes you a member of the elite, could make you a sucker and a fool and account for that. But the ones who are really making it are just a very small number of people. Majority of them, not all, but the majority of them come from wealth, and they've been to the Ivy League high schools, the Ivy League universities, and so on, so that they are overrepresented there. But so they were in the 1930s or the 1920s. That hasn't changed. The difference is that they believe themselves to be citizens of the nation, back in the 1930s or even 1970s and before. Now they don't. They now perceive themselves to be a self-contained elite, and the citizenry are just not even the shit on their shoes, and that is the difference. And I don't know exactly how, and maybe in the comments someone can comment that how is it that these elites suddenly decided that they had no connection at all to their fellow citizens who were not part of the elite class, because it happened almost within a decade that it happened. Now maybe the mass conversion took a little bit longer of the elites, but they suddenly decided that the working class people, their fellow citizens, were no different from the third world illiterate peasant from the mud hut in Africa, that there was no difference between the local working class and those mud hut peasants in the third world, and therefore they all could be written off as just cannon fodder, just nothing. And that separation, that seemed to take place rather quickly. Also viewed on attitudes, like if you support something like, I don't know, Donald Trump or something, then automatically you're not only a fascist and all that sort of stuff, but it reduces you to irrelevant, illiterate, stupid peasants, and you're nothing. And that sort of also is something relatively new in terms of the history of the modern rule of law Western democracies. because in itself it's hugely debilitating. If the elite class don't see that they have things in common with their fellow citizens, the middle class and so on, then you have in effect a society that is split, and the elites who hold most of the levers of power, whether it be news commentariat or banking or whatever, they perceive that they have nothing in common with their fellow citizens. And that's a huge leap, something that would have been considered unthinkable 50 years ago. You've been fantastic today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.